All kinds of things can happen when you do a collaborative project with friends. We all know that. But when it goes beyond a friendship and it's about integrity and it's about artistry.
What are the parameters we're given, and how are we going to solve this and make it happen by the launch date? And everyone played their part.
The flutist is never named. It's never given a gender.
Musicians, sometimes we can tend to kind of devalue our own worth. That's the easy part, is to reduce somebody. Mm-hmm. The fulfilling and the creative part is to actually look at the totality of somebody.
It's just beautiful work, and what magic it is. I mean, really, it's timeless. I just love it.
Welcome, Marianne Gedigian, Adam Workman, and Patti Adams. Thank you so much for being here. Cheers.
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 Awesome. And what are you drinking?
It's La Croix, sweetie. Sweetie darling, yes.
Oh, and right above you. Oh, it is vanilla.
Mine's a little vanilla Crown Royal. Goes down easily.
Delicious. And who's our friend in the background?
That's Godzilla.
Oh, awesome.
Mine is Earl Grey latte.
Ooh.
I know, it's terrible. I did bring this out, which is usually takes place 2 hours from now. Pinot Noir.
You're welcome to, time travel forward.
I have to tell you, Tamara, the way that you're set up right now, you see how the flute player is just kind of peeking out like that?
Yeah.
That right there is enough to make me want to drink 2 hours early.
Perfect.
What are you drinking, dear?
I'm drinking a Negroni, which I thought was symbolic because it's 3 equal parts. Gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth. But not many drinks are 3 equal parts.
Well, the whole thing started, of course, because of the story, Tamara. And one of the most memorable moments for me with this book was when I heard Marianne give the Flute Lovers Luncheon speech. And that's where this story comes from.
So, the flute convention happens every year. Sadly, not this year, but it draws flutists from around the globe. What, 3,000 to 5,000? Is that a fair number? Right, something like that. So it is a flute-centric circle of people. Enthusiasts, professionals, you name it, everybody's there. And so I was asked to present the little talk at the Flute Lovers Luncheon. And typically people talk about their careers. Well, I wasn't going to presume that in a crowd of 3,000 to 5,000 people and there was anything particularly special about mine. So I really didn't want to do it, speak about that. And so I said, I'll come up with something else. I was laughing as you were talking about the deadline for the book, because part of that rush was my fault, because I'll figure it out. So I didn't figure it out. And the convention was in August, and my family was saying, what are you going to talk about? I said, I don't know. And so I was out in Oregon in July at the ABC Band College seminar, which I love. It's teacher training for band directors, and I love those people, and it is a warm and fuzzy environment. And I was traveling from there to Boston. I was headed to Boston for memorial service for a colleague and friend of mine that I sat next to for 10 years in Boston, Laura Albeck, spectacular oboist, wonderful person who died very young. And so on the flight, I decided I would do this between Oregon and Boston. I would just write. And I think that I just had a lot of Laura in my heart during that flight. I was just thinking about her and all of our time together. And so I said, I don't know what to write. And so I said, I'll just write whatever comes to mind. So I wrote Once Upon a Time. And it is virtually pretty much what you see is what you get in the book. I mean, of course, they had to monitor my many words, but it really is just a from the heart little allegory. And I think that Laura was on the flight next to me like she would have been in rehearsal saying, hurry up, they're about to I'm going to give the A. She was helping me. And I think we were all just feeling very intimate with one another in this luncheon. And that's hard to do when you're around 3,000 to 5,000 people playing excerpts higher, faster, and louder than the last person. And so I gave this talk, and well, I think you should probably pick it up from there.
Well, being in the audience, and Adam was there as well. So of course, I was there because I'm a big MG fan, and but beyond the flute playing, I really wanted to know what she had to say. And I particularly enjoy this luncheon because it's fascinating people throughout our community in the flute world that don't necessarily do it for a living at this luncheon, but they're all very respected professionals in their own fields. And I try and go every year, every summer when I can at the convention, because I love meeting these people and listening to their perspectives and just sharing interesting stories with people who do something else besides blow flute. It really is fascinating to hear their love of the instrument and their take on what it is we do. The speech was incredibly moving, but what my perspective was, I started watching people listening to her, especially toward the end, when things weren't working out for the flutist in the book. And the people's reactions were astonishing. So afterwards, I was just at this point an observer, because immediately afterwards, I saw all these people mob Marianne. They wanted copies of the story. They wanted this, people. And all I kept thinking in the world is, this needs to be a book. This needs to be a book. And when it was finally my turn up there, I kind of tried to part the Red Sea, and I was like, do not give this away. It needs to be a book. And when you do the book, I'll illustrate it.
Wow.
And her eyes just kind of went like this for just a second, and she was like, okay. And then she greeted the next person. Okay. Well, I think then the next person in line might have been this one. As we know, Adam hears an idea and makes things happen. So your turn, Adam.
Here we are all in this room together, and I was very fortunate to, side note, this was the very first NFA that Flutistry was an exhibitor at.
Oh.
So my plate was full. I don't think I slept for a few weeks in there. And I made sure, as soon as I knew that Marianne was giving a talk, that I was able to go. And I was very fortunate to be able to sit at one of the tables with some of Marianne's former teachers. And it was just really special to be sitting there. And I was there. I remember Debbie Parker was sitting right next to me, and we were just like absolutely just blubbering. I mean, just crying and trying to hold it together because it was such a beautiful story. And so I was one of those people that Patti observed, I'm sure. And my mind was racing first with, and I remember saying this to Marianne, she might not remember this, but I just remember saying, you do this to us time and time again from the stage with your flute. How could you possibly get up and use these words as well? And how could you be that gifted? And it was just so beautiful, so stunning. And I don't remember much other than trying to not be a mess. And I do remember Patti speaking to Marianne and saying, this needs to be a book and I want to illustrate it. And at that time, Patti, I was not aware of your provenance as a wonderful, amazing visual artist. So there was a part of me when I first thought, Patti's going to illustrate it. I was like, a flutist that illustrates, in the same way that I was thinking, well, Marianne just wowed me from the stage with her words. And it was just absolutely then starting to see some of your work. And then I realized that you had made the poster for the NFA, that one. So I started to connect the dots, and I immediately was like, I had the same feeling, like this is a story. It's definitely something that needs to get out there, and that should be shared with not just the flute community, but every musician and artist or professional that's passionate, or even non-professional, that's just passionate about what they do and care about what they do as a hobby or a profession or what have you. And, bringing Patti's gravitas to it as a as an illustrator and a fine artist, it was just something that was always in the back of my mind. And then after that incredible moment, it was like, oh my goodness, I got to go back to the exhibit floor and run a show.
So I remember it this way, very similar, is that Patti came up and said, don't give it away. This is going to be a book. The way I remember it, it was pretty much a directive in the most open-spirited, beautiful-hearted way. And I seem to remember saying, it's not a book. And she said, it's a book, and I'm going to illustrate it. And then Adam, as he said, through his sobs, said, what I remember, Adam, is you saying, it, and I'll do it. It was just that quick that it happened. And it's, you know, their contributions are amazing for such a simple story to make it such a special publication.
But that's what I think. I mean, this book is for every age. But when you're talking about children's picture books, I think that's what's so amazing about children's picture books is every word, it really matters. And every word is so powerful. And then the pictures add further imagination to the words. And that's exactly what this book does, except it's not only for children, it's really for everyone. So, I mean, the simplicity is, I think, what makes it so beautiful.
And it was interesting, something I didn't really realize, Marianne, I think until we really had gotten into the project, was that you had written your speech on the plane. And I drew out the book on a plane. But Marianne was going from Washington, Oregon to Boston, and I was going from New Orleans to San Diego. And I got on the plane with a little purple sketchbook. And I'll never forget, the plane took off. I had taken the speech and double spaced it so I could make notes or whatever, because I needed to divide it up, you know, into pages. And the plane took off and I just started scribbling. The plane landed and I wrote the end. Literally. I mean, I had no, it was just that way.
Same for me.
It was like the wheels went, you know, on the landing. I was so surprised because I had just written the end. But all the scrawls that I made basically were the book. The initial scrawls that I did on that plane. But I didn't realize that she had written it this way and I had sketched it out going that way. It was very bizarre.
I remember I had one single day to come up with a way to announce the book. And I had a few of the plates from Patti's work that I was able to access. And I just spent one day literally doing nothing else but playing around with a video editor, which I had never done a commercial or anything like that before. I'd used iMovie before, and I just started dropping some of the images into that, seeing if I could somehow tell the story of how exciting this was to do that, for that the book was coming out and what the story was. Speaking of planes, you know, that was all just an idea that we were going to have it. We had no idea that we were actually going to be able to have the books in our hands for the NFA, because we didn't know anything could happen, get caught up in customs, you know, anything like that. So when I took my flight, I happened to be flying from Los Angeles to Orlando for that convention. The very first thing I did when we landed was start figuring out, where are the boxes of books? I need those. I need to lay my hands on those and I need to see them. We finally got it.
I love hearing this because I meaning I feel guilty hearing Patti and Adam talk about how hard how hard we worked and all these deadlines, because basically I wrote this little story and they said, now we're going to, it was like as if I had bought flour and said, hey, here's some flour. And then these master bakers just said, okay, we're ready. And then they were covered in flour at the end. And I just came and ate the bread and said, it was really good. And then later saw what went into it.
Marianne saying, no, we can't cut that. That needs to stay, but this can go. You know, that kind of direction from the author is everything. If I don't have that direction, I don't know what to, you don't know what to draw.
So it always cracks me up when you call me an author. I just have to say that. That's the most hilarious part of the book. There is a hilarious part of the project. That's the funniest part. Number two, that had to happen, and probably could even happen more, because speaking a story in front of a table of your most beloved people, right, in a luncheon, and looking out and gazing upon the magnificence of a Patti Adam, and having that sort of inflection and, you know, reeling through the story is very different than the page. And I think that's what Adam and Patti captured, and Katrina, of course, so spectacularly. Adam with his video. I mean, when I saw that video, I was in awe. I mean, I couldn't actually believe that was our little project, and it touched my heart. And that was him speaking through that project. Katrina saying, you know, do you need that? And I said, I need that. She said, do you need that? I need that. Do you need that? You know, nope, no, Katrina, I don't need that. And then, of course, Patti finding the magic through unbelievable technique, imagination, and artistry. I mean, just the magic in the book. And I think that's kind of what happened, is that it's different to read the story than it is to tell a story. And their contributions helped bring it to actual life, I feel.
And it just so happened to be that I was in Austin, Texas at that time.
Right, you were
coincidentally. And we sat in Marianne's kitchen and we did a FaceTime or something on the laptop. And Patti showed us, she took her sketchbook out and in her beautiful way, like, presented her ideas. And
oh my God, I was so nervous.
And much of it, I don't think much of it really changed. I just remember the moment that I remember Marianne seeing the tree in black and white at your breakfast bar right there. And just, I couldn't even look at you because I was just like, I was going to be crying again, like I do apparently. It was just so beautiful, Patti, what you did, the natural inspiration of that, your vision. I mean, I remember we both were just in shock when we were done on that video call.
The thing that's really interesting is the places that got cut, I didn't have a drawing for them because I didn't know what to draw.
Wow.
It was really weird because it just didn't, it's like there weren't vibrations with it or something. But the ones that were so meaningful to me, I knew exactly what it needed to have.
And I got chatting with Patti about it, and then she had a wonderful idea about the flip card part of the book. And that changed everything because I don't even know what to call that. I didn't even know how to Google that. I mean, how do you call that? And
how do you call that?
Like, yeah, like, what do you call that? Where
are you from? How do you call that?
I never did well in English.
I wanted an interactive moment with the reader because I was really, it's my favorite part in the book actually, because it was one of the hardest for me, but one of the parts of the book that I believed in the most profoundly, because any teacher understands with a student, when the student has to decide to flip themselves, that is profoundly important, that they're the ones that do it and not us. You can talk to your blue in the face, but when they finally get it and then you see them understand it and then they change the behavior, that's their involvement from you suggesting. So the suggestion is that you are acting from disappointment and jealousy, but in order for them to get to that other dynamic, that has to be them doing it
from inside.
So I remember even saying, I have no idea how this could happen, Adam, but here's what we've got to do. And I could just see probably poor Adam, you know, dollar signs spinning.
Exactly.
No, it was,
you want to, what?
I had no idea what to expect with the dollars
Oh my
until we
God.
knew what the project was going to look like anyway. I mean, even
Right.
after we found that place in New York, we didn't know what the cost was going to be per book
Right.
yet.
But of
Yeah.
course, Adam doesn't just say, okay, we'll make a little flip, and Patti says, we need the thumb holes. Then there has to be beautiful stitching around the binding, gorgeous fabric underneath the dust jacket. I mean, of course, he did it as a commemorative book. I mean, it's not just, oh, I published a book. That's kind of a relevant point today, right? In the midst of the pandemic, that, you know, how do you find a fair worth for extraordinary work, right? I mean, of course, I mean, Adam's been gracious right throughout, and this was an act of generosity. The idea of valuing to a reasonable extent the artist's contribution in both the story, but certainly in the artwork. And, you know, I think musicians sometimes we can tend to kind of devalue our own worth. Just establishing that mindset to say that this is something of quality, you know, from even the just Patti's perspective, and sticking to that when our community doesn't necessarily support that all the time.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's part of it actually too, is that the you know, the joy that I have. I mean, look, we sell flutes that are anywhere from, you know, $500 to $70,000, $80,000. So, you know, this project, while it wasn't inexpensive, is one of those. It's the great joy of my career so far, and to be able to work with these two masters, and the joy that I get secretly every single time someone picks that book up and gets to take it home, and I ask people to share it. I mean, that's worth, for me, it makes the rest of the stuff that I have to do during the day. This is like one of those little special moments that reminds me how lucky I am. And that for me, that was a selfish investment, but it was, I sat there in that luncheon and had that experience, and I just thought this needs to be shared. I want everyone to have this experience. And through the beauty of Marianne's words and the beauty of Patti's work and the luck of a timeline and hard work on everyone's part, you know, we get to share it. And that's the part that we're so excited. And I'm so honored and grateful that you wanted to talk about it even on this, you know, program that you're putting together. I think it's great.